Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world that smells faintly of olive oil, wood smoke, and the wool of too many unwashed togas. You're waking up as a Roman citizen in the 1st century, and the sun hasn't even bothered to crawl over the rooftops yet. The atrium, the heart of your home, feels both cavernous and close. Shadows dancing against painted walls as a single oil lamp sputters with a sleepy glow. The air is cool, the marble beneath your feet a little less forgiving than that memory foam mattress you're used to. You're groggy, but this isn't the kind of groggy where you grab a phone to scroll. This is the kind where you half expect a slave to appear silently with a basin of water before you've even rubbed your eyes. Spoiler, they probably will. And look, you probably wouldn't survive long in this world without a squad of servants, political connections, or at least a gladiator friend or two. Life's tough here. The streets beyond your doorway are still dark, but danger doesn't sleep pickpockets, rowdy taverns. Even the occasional runaway animal could make the early hours lively. So yeah, you might want to just stay put. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing night owls and early birds alike checking in. Ow. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The atrium smells faintly of last night's dinner: roasted pork, if you're wealthy, barley porridge if you're less so. The open roof above, the compluvium, lets in a faint strip of starlight, and you catch the distant splash of water dripping into the central basin. It's oddly soothing, like an ancient white noise machine. You shift under your rough blanket, tug your tunic into place, and sit upright on your low bed. The floor feels cool and a little gritty beneath your toes. Someone didn't sweep properly last night, and you're filing that away for a gentle lecture later. Servants stir at the edges of the house, soft footsteps and muffled voices carrying through the thin morning air. A slave carrying a bronze lamp ducks into your room, eyes lowered, setting it by the door so you won't stumble your way into the peristyle like a half-asleep fool. You notice the flame trembles in the faint draft. Rome might be grand, but insulation, yeah, that wasn't really their thing. You stand and stretch, joints popping in ways that remind you maybe you're not quite as young as you pretend to be. The frescoes on the walls, faded reds and ochres showing half-dressed gods and action scenes, stare down at you like nosy roommates. Historians still argue whether every Roman really saw these as art, or if it was just ancient bathroom graffiti with better paint. Either way, it's the backdrop to your morning routine. Out in the atrium, the oil lamps flicker low. You catch sight of your wax tablet sitting on a small side table, yesterday's scrawled notes hardened into ridges. Probably reminders about grain prices, or that neighbor who still owes you money and conveniently forgets. You shake your head, the sort of silent mutter you'll repeat a dozen times before breakfast. A servant hands you a small cup of water. It's lukewarm, drawn from the household cistern. You splash your face with it, jolting awake in a way coffee lovers might actually respect. The Romans didn't have your espresso shots, but that cold slap of reality. Timeless. The silence of pre-dawn Rome is deceptive. Out beyond your house, muffled sounds drift in the bark of a dog, a wagon wheel creaking, someone arguing far too early for civilized society. Inside, though, it's controlled calm. You know your day will eventually mean forums, politics, markets, clients, maybe even gladiator gossip. But for these brief moments, it's just you, your atrium, and that smell of last night's smoke clinging stubbornly to the rafters. You shuffle toward the impluvium, dipping a hand into the cool water that's collected overnight from the open sky. It's not exactly filtered, but it feels refreshing. The chill makes you inhale sharply, and for a second, it's easy to pretend you're standing at a mountain spring rather than in the middle of an urban sprawl where sewage runs in open gutters. Rome had aqueducts, marvels of engineering that historians rightly geek out over, but in your house, it's this shallow pool of rainwater that sets the tone for your morning. There's movement near the family shrine in the corner. You catch a slave arranging tiny figurines, the Lares and Penates, household gods who watch over your home. Their little clay faces glow eerily in the lamplight, like silent judges ready to tally up your behavior. You'll deal with them more formally later, but you nod anyway, a quick, respectful acknowledgement. Like saying good morning to Grandma's photo on the mantle, and yes, you're already hungry. Bread waits somewhere, maybe figs if the cook didn't eat them all, and you wonder idly if today's loaf will be rock hard or merely jaw-testing. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans dunked their bread in watered-down wine at breakfast, not because they were trying to get tipsy before work, but because wine killed the nasties in the water. Health hack, ancient edition. The walls seemed to lean closer in the dim light, reminding you that most Romans didn't exactly live in sprawling villas. Even as a citizen, your house is compact, practical, and more about function than flair. Those elite domas you see in movies, not everyone had them. The majority crammed into insulate apartment blocks with questionable plumbing and a knack for collapsing at the worst times. You're lucky to have an atrium at all, you sigh, taking in one more lungful of the cool, faintly dusty air. There's something grounding about this moment, even if your bed left your back feeling like it fought a legionary campaign overnight. The lamps will be extinguished soon, replaced by the slow gold of sunrise, but for now, you linger in this half-light world. A passing thought nudges you. Somewhere across the city, bakers are already at their ovens, the scent of warm bread floating down alleys. Somewhere else, a soldier on night watch yawns, desperate for relief. And in a cramped insula, another citizen stirs awake to the sound of rats scrabbling in the rafters. You, at least, have a roof that doesn't leak and servants to sweep up those stray crumbs that attract pests. Gratitude, Roman style. You lean against the wall, arms folded, listening. The faint crackle of the lamp, the distant shuffle of sandals, the whisper of fabric as a servant slips by with another jug. These tiny sounds knit together the stillness before dawn. You can almost convince yourself the city is holding its breath, waiting with you for that first streak of sun to hit the rooftops. You take another splash of water to the face, and this time you grin. It's bracing, sure, but also oddly satisfying. Maybe you'll survive the morning after all. Maybe. You shuffle across the atrium, feet dragging just enough to sound like someone in desperate need of a second alarm clock. There isn't one, of course. No snooze button in ancient Rome unless you count a very patient slave gently nudging your shoulder again and again. Lucky you today, you managed to get up without grumbling too much, which is saying something. The first task is shaking off that lingering heaviness of night. Cold water is your friend, though it feels less like a friend and more like an overly aggressive acquaintance. A servant has already set out a bronze basin. The metal gleams faintly in lamplight, and the water inside ripples as you dip your hands. You splash it across your face, instantly awake. You can almost hear modern coffee drinkers scoffing, but this works. Sort of. Your tunic hangs loosely on you, plain linen that scratches in places you don't really want to mention. Over it, you start wrapping your toga, and here's where the comedy begins. Wearing a toga properly is like trying to fold a bedsheet while it's still on the bedward. Endless and a guaranteed way to curse before sunrise. Historians still argue whether everyday Romans actually wore their togas all the time, or if they cheated with simpler garments unless they had business in public. But for the sake of dignity, and because you might bump into a client later, you wrestle the wool around your body. It's heavy, warm in winter, suffocating in summer, and always slightly itchy. Wool fibers tickle your neck as though reminding you, yes, I am both expensive and uncomfortable. The joke's on you, you paid for this status symbol, now deal with it. You pin the fabric as best you can. Is it straight? Maybe. Does it look like you fell into a blanket fort and crawled out half-dressed? Also maybe. Still, you pull your shoulders back and tell yourself you look dignified. Rome loves appearances, after all. You glance at a small bronze mirror propped against the wall. It's polished metal, not glass. So your reflection is warped, like looking at yourself in a puddle after 3 cups of wine. Hair, passable. Beard, patchy. Dignity, questionable. You run your fingers through your hair anyway, muttering that maybe Julius Caesar had it easier once he went bald. The basin water swirls with dirt from your hands, ripples catching lamplight like liquid bronze. You take a moment to wash your arms too, rubbing away the night sweat and dust. Romans didn't exactly have showers, but this routine keeps you feeling somewhat civilized. Besides, in a city where a public bath waits later in the day, this is just the warm-up. A slave appears with a cloth to dab your arms dry. You nod, not really looking at him, and he bows out silently. Funny thing, Roman households could have dozens of slaves, or just 1 or 2, depending on wealth. You, somewhere in the middle. Enough to help with chores, not enough to throw lavish parties with. Somewhere across the city, someone's probably fumbling through this same routine alone. No slaves, just a leaky roof and cold water from a bucket. Perspective helps. You stretch again, arms raised, toga pulling awkwardly across your chest. The wool resists, reminding you of its bulk. Ancient Romans sometimes wore lighter cloaks or just tunics, but togas were for citizens who wanted to show off status. And you, yawning here in half-darkness, are definitely trying to look the part. You mutter under your breath about how ridiculous it is that your ancestors thought wool drapery equals civilization. Somewhere, a god is laughing. Maybe Mercury, patron of tricksters, finds the whole toga struggle hilarious. You imagine him elbowing Jupiter, whispering, "Look at this guy, can't even tie a sheet right." The smell of oil wafts faintly through the room as a lamp sputters. Olive oil roams everything. Fuel, food, even moisturizer. You glance at a jar nearby and consider dabbing some on your skin. Not yet, though. That's later, when you feel more alive. For now, it's about clearing the cobwebs from your brain. Outside, a rooster crows, sharp and insistent. You roll your eyes. Rome is huge, noisy, chaotic, but even in the capital of the world, some guy's rooster still thinks it's a rural farm. The bird's crowing cuts through the still, dark air, joined by the faint bray of a donkey. Somewhere down the street, a cart rattles past. Morning is beginning whether you're ready or not. You lean over the impluvium again, studying your reflection in the shallow water. The stars above are fading now, their faint glimmers mirrored in the pool. You reach down, scoop a handful, and let it drip across your face once more. It trickles down your neck, soaking the edge of your tunic. Cold shock, but clean enough. You pat yourself dry with the corner of your toga, probably not the intended use. But practicality beats tradition when water's running down your chest. Somewhere, another Roman is doing the same, cursing softly and wondering if anyone else cheats with their toga. You step toward the peristyle, where faint dawn air filters in from the garden. Your sandals slap lightly on the floor as you walk, the sound echoing in the stillness. Your body's awake now, though your mind is still shaking off dreams of chariots and shouting crowds. A fleeting thought crosses your mind. Some Romans believed dreams carried messages from the gods. Others thought they were just leftovers from overeating before bed. You decide yours were probably the second option. No god would bother sending you visions about sandals breaking in the mud. You breathe deeply, taking in the cool air. Smells of damp stone, faint flowers from the garden, and smoke from last night's hearth cling to the house. The mixture is oddly grounding. This is your world. Imperfect, dusty, loud, alive. Another servant approaches, holding out a small comb carved from bone. You run it through your hair, though the comb catches more often than it glides. Your hair is thick, stubborn, and slightly greasy. Not exactly marble statue perfection, but it'll do. You quip aloud, "At least I'm not Caligula," and chuckle at your own joke. Nobody laughs with you, but hey, audience of one counts. Historians still argue whether Romans cared as much about personal grooming as later cultures did. Some sources gush about oils and perfumes, while others point out that most people stank like goats. Judging by your comb-snagging hair, you're somewhere in the middle. By the time you've wrangled your toga into something approaching order, the atrium is glowing with the faintest hint of early morning. The oil lamps gutter out one by one, slaves pinching the flames with practiced ease. Darkness lifts just enough to outline the walls, painted gods and bronze fittings in pale gray. You roll your shoulders, stand taller, and exhale. There it is, that subtle shift when night tilts toward day. You're dressed, half-washed, vaguely awake. It's not glamorous, but it's survival. And in Rome, survival before sunrise is already a kind of victory. Somewhere in your mind, you imagine modern folks doing their own routines. Phones buzzing, coffee brewing, showers steaming. And then there's you, cursing wool, splashing rainwater, hoping your toga doesn't unravel mid-morning. It's the same story told in different costumes. You glance once more at your warped reflection in the bronze mirror. Not perfect, never perfect. But it's enough. You're a Roman citizen, alive in the heart of empire. Ready or almost ready to face whatever chaos comes when the city fully wakes. The peristyle garden waits beyond the atrium, a small rectangle of greenery tucked inside the stone embrace of your house. As you step into it, the air shifts. The faint smell of damp earth and crushed leaves lingers, carried by a whisper of wind that slipped in through the open colonnade. It's not a huge garden, more like a private courtyard dressed up in shrubs, herbs, and maybe a small fountain that burbles gently, just enough to trick you into thinking you're somewhere far more peaceful than the middle of Rome. Your sandals click lightly against the paving stones as you wander toward the colonnade's edge. Here, just before the sky brightens, the household stirs like a waking animal. Slaves move quietly, some sweeping, some carrying baskets of bread, figs, or leftover cheese. Catch snippets of whispers, mundane chatter about chores, rumors about the neighbors. Maybe even a joke or two muttered under breath when they think you aren't listening. Then there's the family. Some relatives wake earlier than others, but this moment before sunrise is when you often gather in the peristyle. It's not exactly a formal breakfast, more like a bleary-eyed shuffle into one another's presence. Your wife, or if you're unmarried, maybe your mother or a sibling, offers a hushed salve, her breath fogging faintly in the cool air. You return the greeting, voice low so as not to break the morning's fragile calm. Someone passes you a small hunk of bread, yesterday's loaf softened slightly with oil. It crunches loudly in your mouth, echoing absurdly in the quiet space. You pretend not to notice that your cousin snatched the last fig off the tray, popping it in his mouth like a thief caught red-handed. Bread, fruit, maybe a smear of cheese, that's your pre-dawn fuel. Forget bacon and eggs. Those are dreams for another continent and another millennium. As you chew, you glance toward the lararium, the little shrine glowing in the corner. The tiny clay figurines of the household gods stand alert, like miniature sentries watching everything. Their presence isn't intimidating, it's reassuring. The Larrys and Peanutties are here to protect the family, to ensure that meals don't spoil, children don't sicken, and the roof doesn't cave in on a windy night. Still, there's always a faint edge of superstition. What if you forget to nod toward them? What if you skip a prayer? Would they sulk like offended relatives? You decide not to risk it. A respectful glance, a quiet salvete, and you return to your bread. A candle flickers at the shrine, its smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. The smell of melted wax mingles with the tang of herbs in the garden, mint, rosemary, maybe even a sprig of lavender. The Romans weren't shy about planting useful plants right in their peristyles. It's convenient and keeps the place smelling less like damp wool. Your younger relative, maybe a child or nephew, chases a shadow along the colonnade, sandals slapping against the stones. You roll your eyes. Rome may be the center of the civilized world, but try telling that to a child who thinks shadows are monsters worth hunting before sunrise. A slave hisses at him to settle down, though the boy only giggles louder. For all the solemnity of Roman ritual, families were still families. The bread grows dry in your mouth, so you wash it down with watered wine. Yes, watered. You don't chug it like a frat party. You sip it, the diluted taste crisp but not overpowering. Quirky factremons considered drinking undiluted wine barbaric, something only fools or foreigners did. You swirl your cup like a philosopher, though in reality you're just hoping the wine cuts the chalky taste of yesterday's bread. Conversation stirs among the family. Someone murmurs about a neighbor's lawsuit. Another mentions hearing distant drums from the night before. Or just a rowdy tavern brawl. Oh, buddy, sure. Historians still argue whether Romans enjoyed peaceful, quiet mornings, or if the city was always as noisy as a construction site. Judging by the muffled shouts from a nearby alley, you'd put your money on the second. You lean against a column, feeling the cool stone against your shoulder. The first faint hints of dawn begin to color the sky above the courtyard. It's a pale, milky light, weak at first, but growing stronger with each breath. Shadows soften. Frescoes on the walls gain definition. And your relatives' faces take on that sleepy clarity of people who are slowly, reluctantly, becoming human again. Someone produces olives, passing the small bowl around. You pop one into your mouth, the briny bite waking your tongue. Romans loved olives. They were breakfast, snack, garnish, you name it. You suck the pit clean and flick it discreetly into another bowl, because the last thing you need is a scolding about spitting olive pits onto the floor. Even in Rome, manners mattered. As you stand there chewing, you think about the day ahead. Clients will come, business will demand attention, and the forum will buzz with more gossip than any one brain should process before lunch. But for now, this is the eye of the storm. Bread, olives, faint chatter, and the tiny flame of a shrine. It's quiet, grounding, almost sacred in its simplicity. A distant cockcrow splits the air again, sharper now, as if declaring, "Wake up, you slackers." The empire isn't going to run itself. You smirk. The bird's right. You drain the last sip of watered wine and wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. Across the peristyle, a slave yawns silently, covering his mouth with practiced discretion. You notice your wife or mother adjusting her stola, the fabric falling gracefully to her ankles. She straightens the fibula pin at her shoulder, muttering about how the wool scratches too, though she bears it with more grace than you do. You exchange a small smile, the kind that says, yes, this world is itchy, inconvenient, and demanding, but it's ours. The boy who is chasing shadows finally collapses onto a bench, panting, cheeks flushed pink. You ruffle his hair as you pass, and he grins, eyes bright despite the early hour. Childhood doesn't wait for the sun, it races ahead of it. The little fountain in the courtyard trickles steadily, a soothing background noise. You focus on it for a moment, letting your breath fall in rhythm with the splash of water. It's like an ancient ASMR track, steady, repetitive, calming. If you close your eyes, you could almost drift back to sleep, but duty tugs at you. The empire doesn't pause for naps. One last glance at the lararium. The clay figures seem more awake now, their shadows longer, their presence firmer in the growing light. You nod again, quietly acknowledging that their watch continues even when you're too busy fussing with your toga. Then, with a soft exhale, you push away from the column. Bread gone, olives savored, whispers shared. The peristyle has served its purpose, family bound together in small rituals before the larger theater of Rome demands its players. The light grows stronger, spilling across painted walls, catching in bronze fittings, glinting off the ripple of the fountain. The city is waking, and so are you. The bread's last crumbs still stick to your teeth as you make your way back across the atrium. The family drifts into its corners again, retreating to their own little rituals. But your task now is different. Before the sun fully clears the rooftops, you've got to see to the real machinery of your world. The household staff. Without them, the empire might still exist, Sure, but your mornings would feel a lot less smooth and a lot more like chaos. Your sandals scrape against stone as you step into the service wing, where the smell of yesterday's ashes clings stubbornly to the walls. The first slave you see is crouched by the hearth, coaxing flame back into reluctant embers. His hands move fast, practiced, breaking twigs and blowing gently until the smoke curls upward in a lazy gray ribbon. It's an art, really getting the fire started before sunrise. And if he fails, well, you wouldn't have bread toasted, meat cooked, or even hot water ready for later baths. You clear your throat, just enough for him to stiffen and bow his head. Respectful, nervous, but efficient. The kitchen hums like a hive. A slave girl slices yesterday's leftovers, muttering about how the knife dulls too quickly. Another checks clay jars lined neatly against the wall, tapping the lids to make sure the flour hasn't spoiled. There's a faint, sour odor near one jar you wrinkle your nose, pointing at it. She blushes, bows, and hurries to fetch fresh grain from storage. You don't have to say much. The raised eyebrow says enough. Moving on, you cross into the stable area. The animals shuffle restlessly in the pre-dawn chill. Your horse snorts, steam rising from its nostrils like a little war engine gearing up for the day. A stable boy scurries to brush its mane, his tunic spotted with straw. You crouch slightly, running your hand down the horse's flank. Smooth, strong, reassuring. Even in Rome, even in all its grandeur, the rhythm of life still depends on beasts of burden. You stand again, turning to the boy. Feed him early, you mutter, voice half gravelly from the morning. He nods so fast you're surprised his head doesn't fall off. It's not cruelty. It's the hierarchy. Rome runs on it. You give orders, they obey. Without that chain of command, your household and, honestly, the empire would fall apart. Historians still argue whether this reliance on slaves weakened Rome in the long run. But at the moment, you're not thinking big picture. You're just making sure your horse doesn't go hungry. The storeroom smells of oil, wine, and damp clay. Amphorae line the walls, each sealed with wax. One slave carefully checks the stoppers, making sure no rats have nibbled their way in. Another scribbles tallies onto a wax tablet quantities of oil, grain, dried fish. You hover behind him for a moment, watching the stylus scratch into the soft surface. His hand trembles slightly under your gaze. You smirk, tapping the top of his head lightly with 2 fingers. Neater, he exhales relief as you step away. A loud clang breaks the quiet. Someone's dropped a pot in the kitchen. You hear a sharp intake of breath, then silence. Everyone freezes, waiting to see if you'll storm in, demand explanations, dole out punishments. But you don't. Instead, you let the tension hang a beat. Then you chuckle softly and call out, "Don't let it happen twice." Laughter ripples nervously through the room. Even here, at dawn, authority is a performance. You step into the courtyard again, drawing in a lungful of cool air to clear away the smoke and grain dust. The sky is lightening now, a bruised purple, giving way to pale gold. The city stirs faintly beyond the walls, wagon wheels creaking, dogs barking, voices rising. Inside your home, though, you're still the conductor of this orchestra of chores. The laundry slave passes by, arms full of tunics that smell faintly of ash soap. She nods quickly, eyes down. You glance at the pile and sigh, so many stains, so little chance they'll ever come out. Roman laundry, after all, wasn't exactly fragrant. Urine was often used as a cleaning agent, collected in public jars and sold to fullers. Quirky tidbit: if you think your detergent smells bad, try scrubbing your toga with fermented pea. You don't mention it aloud. Doit, prefer your breakfast not come back up. Back in the kitchen, the cook fusses over a pot, stirring a mash of beans with a wooden spoon. He glances up at you, sweat already beading his forehead. "Too thin," you say flatly. He adds more beans, nodding like you've just solved the riddle of the Sphinx. Truth is, you don't care much about bean consistency, but it keeps them sharp, attentive. And in a city where food shortages are a constant worry, you want no mistakes. Your household staff is large enough to keep things running, but small enough that you recognize every face. Each one has a role. The boy at the stable, the girl with the figs, the woman who sweeps the atrium. You pass them all in turn, giving orders, checking progress, ensuring the morning rhythm stays steady. It's routine, almost boring, but there's a strange satisfaction in it. The empire might be chaos, but your house, that's order because you make it so. It's a small interruption. One slave mutters that the well is low, water levels dropping faster than expected. You frown, chewing your lip. Water is life here, and while Rome's aqueducts are feats of engineering, they don't solve everything. Some days, wells go dry. Some mornings, the cistern runs low. Historians still debate how efficient Roman water systems really were, but for you, it's not abstract, it's urgent. You wave a hand. Draw from the neighbor's cistern quietly. He bows, scurrying off. Problem solved for now. The household cat slinks into the kitchen, tail high, eyes gleaming in lamplight. The slaves tense, but you laugh softly. Cats are practical here, vermin control. You crouch, scratching its ears, and it purrs like a little lion. You quip, better at her job than half of you, and a few chuckles escape. Humor softens the weight of authority, reminding them you're human too. You linger by the hearth once more, watching flames finally catch and rise steady. The warmth licks at your face, banishing the chill of dawn. A pot hangs above the fire now, water beginning to steam. Tea isn't a thing here, coffee neither, but hot water? Even that feels like luxury when the air is cold. You rub your hands together, sighing as the smoke curls lazily toward the rafters. The chores are mostly set. Bread kneaded, horses fed, jars checked, laundry washed. The staff moves with more confidence now, their early morning panic easing into rhythm. You walk through the house one more time, scanning, nodding, occasionally correcting. A sandal here, a crooked jar lid there. Small things, but they matter. By now, the light spilling into the atrium is golden, strong enough that lamps are extinguished. Shadows retreat to corners, and frescoes glow with color. You pause in the center, looking around. Everything is in motion, yet somehow stable, like the gears of a massive clock. This is your domain, your miniature empire. And just as emperors rely on senators and soldiers, you rely on these hand-skilled, silent, steady too. Keep your mornings from unraveling. You take a deep breath, shoulders relaxing. The chores are under control, the household set. Outside, the city roars louder with every passing minute. Soon, you'll step into that chaos. But for now, you savor the order you've built here, before the day demands everything from you. The small lararium in the corner of the atrium waits patiently, a silent audience to the unfolding morning. You approach it deliberately, feeling the smooth coolness of the marble floor beneath your sandals, the faint weight of responsibility pressing down on your shoulders. The household gods Lares and Penates are miniature sentries, tiny deities whose influence stretches from the kitchen to the streets beyond. They demand respect, and in return, they offer protection. Or at least, that's the hope. You bow slightly, murmuring the morning salutation you've practiced since childhood. Salve, Lares, et Penates, you whisper, the Latin rolling softly off your tongue. The smell of incense curls upward from a small burner, mingling with the faint scent of herbs from the peristyle. You wave the smoke gently toward the figures, a gesture meant to carry your prayers and gratitude upward. A quick nod, a silent request for safety, prosperity, and the avoidance of that neighborly dispute you've been dreading small. Personal entreaties within the grander scheme of Rome's sprawling chaos. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that speaking directly to the gods without offerings was like trying to phone a friend on a disconnected line. You've learned it's easier to light the incense. As you make your way around the shrine, you notice a small spill of oil on the marble, probably from the last ritual. You wipe it up with a cloth, murmuring to yourself that even the gods appreciate a tidy altar. Historians still argue whether the average Roman actually treated the lararium as a spiritual hub, or more like decorative superstition. But for you, it's both. It's a daily moment of calm, a rhythm that helps you focus before the city fully awakens. Your fingers linger over the small figurines. The Lares are tiny, cheerful in their rigid stances. The Pinates are a little more solemn, guardians of the pantry and household resources. You offer a soft joke to yourself. Don't let the wine run out, or I'll know who to blame. Silence answers back. Perhaps they have a sense of humor. Perhaps they do not. It's better to assume they do. The incense burns steadily now, thin gray spirals rising to the ceiling. You watch, hypnotized slightly by the motion. There's something meditative about this moment, the blend of quiet, scent, and responsibility. You realize as you bow your head again that these small rituals serve more than superstition. They center you. They remind you that while chaos may reign outside, within these walls, you maintain order. From the corner of your eye, a young slave hesitates, holding a small bowl of oil and a few grains of incense. You nod toward him, and he places them gently at the base of the shrine. Timing matters too early, and it seems rushed. Too late, and it appears disrespectful. He returns to his corner, eyes bright with the satisfaction of having performed his duties correctly. You appreciate that. Rome functions not just on law and military might, but on countless tiny acts of care performed before dawn. You move back to the central column, inhaling the cool, early morning air. The sky has shifted from deep indigo to the faintest lavender. Shadows stretch across the atrium, brushing the walls and the floor. You notice the light catching on the little figurines, making them seem almost alive, their tiny faces animated by the sunrise. Perhaps the gods themselves are waking with the day. You murmur another soft prayer, more personal this time. It's not grandiose, it's practical. Keep the staff steady, the children safe, the bread from burning. Small entreaties for daily survival. You don't ask for empire or glory. Those ambitions are reserved for the forum, not your humble home. Quirky fact. Some Roman citizens believed that failing to address the household gods before breakfast could bring minor annoyances for the rest of the day, like spilling wine or misplacing keys. You don't take chances. A faint rustle draws your attention. The household cat, ever patient, winds itself around your ankles. You bend down, scratching it behind the ears, murmuring a small thanks for its continued vigilance. Vermin control and morale, all wrapped up in one furry package. Humor bubbles in your chest as you think of telling the gods that this cat is an underappreciated hero of Rome. You laugh softly, a gentle sound in the dim atrium. From outside, the city is stirring. You hear the faint scrape of wagon wheels, the distant caw of crows, the sharp bark of a dog. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys as cooking fires begin their day. You pause, eyes closed briefly, feeling the pulse of the empire beyond your walls. This ritual, however small, connects you to it. By honoring the gods, checking the household, and preparing mentally, you anchor yourself in the rhythm of Roman life. The incense burns low, and the smoke thins. You bow once more decisively this time. The gods are acknowledged, the staff has performed their duties correctly, the household is orderly. You step back, feeling a subtle lightness in your chest. Morning is progressing, and you are ready to move on to the next set of duties. One last glance at the lararium. The figurines seem to smile back, though perhaps it's just the angle of the sun. You let your gaze linger, committing this moment to memory. It's a reminder that even in the busiest city in the world, even when chores, errands, and politics will demand every ounce of your energy, there are these small spaces of control, reflection, and quiet humor. You step away, moving toward the inner hall, where news, gossip, and the small administrative duties of a citizen await. The lararium remains behind you, silent and steadfast, a quiet sentinel for the morning that's only just begun. You settle into a quiet corner of the inner hall, wax tablet in hand, ready to catch the latest news and gossip before the sun fully claims the city. Outside, the faint clatter of the streets begins, carts rolling over cobblestones, the shout of vendors, and the occasional bray of a donkey. Rome is waking, gradually but inevitably, and you, like a conductor of the morning, take a slow, deliberate breath before absorbing the world's first updates. Slaves and attendants deliver tidbits like carriers of the empire's pulse. One whispers of a new edict from the magistrates, a minor tax adjustment on olive oil imports. Another, trying not to giggle, tells of a young gladiator who lost his sandals mid-bout, slipping spectacularly in front of the crowd. You suppress a laugh, imagining the chaos and the roar of the audience. Quirky tidbit: Romans sometimes bet on who would trip first in the arena, and surprisingly, it was considered both entertaining and educational. Historians still argue whether these anecdotes were exaggerated by chroniclers seeking to amuse themselves or factual accounts of minor humiliation in the amphitheater. You scratch a note on your wax tablet. The stylus moves smoothly, leaving a faint impression of each letter in the warm wax. You note the edict, jot down who might benefit or suffer from it, and add a side comment about the gladiator's footwear debacle. The tablet warms under your fingers, and you marvel at the convenience. Reusable, portable, and private. In a city of constant chatter, your wax tablet is a rare sanctuary of personal thought. Meanwhile, the household staff delivers the news from beyond your walls. One girl leans in to report that a neighbor's roof collapsed last night, startling a flock of pigeons into flight. Another mentions that the baker's oven malfunctioned, leaving several loaves undercooked. You make mental notes, recognizing that these minor mishaps ripple outward, affecting trade, supplies, and, eventually, your own routines. The city functions like a massive machine, and gossip is the lubricant that keeps it from seizing. You sip lightly from a cup of diluted wine, savoring the bracing temps as it wakes your senses further. Olives are still on a small plate, a reminder of the earlier breakfast in the peristyle. Rome has a peculiar rhythm. Food, news, and ritual intertwine seamlessly, and you find it comforting. The city may be messy, noisy, and unpredictable, but these small constancies are reassuring anchors. A faint clatter draws your attention to the outer hall. A messenger has arrived, sandals tapping across the flagstones. He bows, hands you a small note sealed with wax. You break the seal carefully, reading the scrawled words aloud to yourself. Senators meeting postponed. Forum traffic heavy. You scribble a note on the wax tablet, a reminder to adjust your plans. Even in this half-light, the city's political pulse reaches your atrium. Nearby, a young slave leans in, whispering that rumors are circulating about a minor scandal in the Senate, someone allegedly bribed with garum. The fish sauce so prized it might as well be gold. You can't help a soft chuckle. Politics in Rome has always been messy, and stories like these provide both entertainment and warning. Quirky tidbit: garum was used more liberally than perfume, yet historians still argue whether bribery in the Senate was as rampant as modern satirical accounts suggest. The light continues to grow, brushing the walls of the inner hall and gilding the edges of the frescoes. You glance at the small, decorative masks, grimacing gods, and faded landscapes, noting how news of the outside world sharpens their features. Everything interacts: light, rumor, ritual, and duty. You scratch another note, considering whether a friend in the merchant district should be warned about the potential olive oil tax increase. Timing is everything. Even small missteps can compound in a city as enormous and interwoven as Rome. A cook approaches, whispering that bread for the forum stall is ready. You glance over, nodding as the smell of warm crust fills the hall. The bread is practical and comforting, a small constant amid the swirling noise of gossip and politics. You cut off a small piece, chewing thoughtfully. It's plain, earthy, satisfying. Breakfast has concluded formally, but sustenance continues in small bites. You turn back to the wax tablet, scratching the final notes before preparing to move on. Today's gossip, city edicts, and minor scandals are cataloged. The tax edict, the gladiator's mishap, the Senate bribe, the roof collapse, the undercooked bread. Rome is alive, a city in perpetual motion, and you are already weaving your own path through it, anticipating which threads to follow, which to ignore. The cat from the atrium weaves between your feet again, tail high and sleek. You bend, scratching behind its ears while musing that this animal is one of the few in your household unconcerned by politics or rumors. It serves the empire only in vermin control, content with that simple purpose. Humor bubbles as you imagine giving the cat a toga. It would probably nap in the forum, pretending to follow the political drama while truly dreaming of fish scraps. The aroma of roasting beans drifts in from the kitchen, mingling with incense and faint smoke from last night's hearth. You inhale, taking in the rich blend. The sensory tapestry reminds you why the small, daily rituals of breakfast, prayer, and observation matter. They provide continuity in a world that otherwise threatens to spin uncontrollably. Quirky fact: some Romans believed that the morning smell of cooking could influence your dreams for the rest of the day. You chuckle softly, wondering if the gladiator's trip was foreshadowed by someone's breakfast aroma. A distant bray of a mule echoes across the courtyard, followed by the clatter of a wagon. News travels quickly here, not just through whispers, but via physical movement. Deliveries, trades, messages. You lean back slightly, enjoying the contrast between stillness inside the inner hall and the busy chaos outside. Historians still argue whether Romans relied more on official channels or informal networks for information, but you know firsthand that both are indispensable. You take another sip of watered wine, letting the taste anchor you. Outside, a faint breeze stirs, brushing through open windows, shifting papers and displacing small bowls of breadcrumbs. You glance down, noting a tiny smear of oil on your tunic. Smiling, you brush it away with the back of your hand. Even in the careful routines of morning, minor mishaps persist. That's life in Rome. The messy, glorious, complicated pulse of civilization alive at dawn. By the time you rise from the inner hall, the sun is peeking over rooftops, gilding the atrium in soft, warm light. News has been gathered, gossip cataloged, and the household's pulse measured. You are awake, informed, and ready to step toward the next phase of morning duties. The endless, repetitive, strangely satisfying business of records, receipts, and communication that cements your role as a Roman citizen. The wax tablet rests in your hand like a compact archive of the morning's intelligence. Scribbles and notations mapping out both the city's pulse and your household's subtle dramas. You pause for a moment, tracing the letters with your fingers, feeling the impressions the stylus left behind. Rome is alive, a living organism outside your walls. And this little tablet is your interface within a combination of personal journal, early warning system, and informal newswire. You glance around the atrium. The sunlight has climbed higher, illuminating frescoes of gods and heroes, their colors richer, edges sharper in the growing morning. Today, your focus is administration. Paperwork, in Roman terms, often means wax tablets, stylus scratches, and occasional correspondence sealed with a blob of warm wax and stamped with a signet ring. Unlike our modern systems, which hum invisibly in the cloud, every note here is tangible, tactile, a physical link to the events of your life. You scratch a list of grain deliveries, noting which merchants are reliable, which are late, and which have had accidents in the past week. A servant steps forward, handing you another wax tablet with the previous day's receipts. You inspect the figures carefully. Olive oil, wine, grain, and small luxury items like dried figs and imported fish, recorded meticulously. You run your finger over a faint smudge, thinking about how the accountant probably panicked last night when the stylus slipped, but it's not a disaster. Mistakes happen, especially before dawn. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that mistakes made on wax tablets could be erased with heat, though the trick was never perfect. Smudges sometimes told their own stories. Historians still argue whether these errors were considered minor or potentially dangerous, but for you, it's mostly an amusing anecdote. You jot another note about a shipment of garum that arrived late. The pungent fish sauce is a culinary treasure, essential for seasoning everything from bread dips to meat stews. You sniff the air, confirming that the delivery wasn't spoiled. Even the smallest oversight in perishable goods could ripple across the day's meals. Your fingers trace the letters, then scratch a diagonal line to mark the task complete. Meanwhile, your eyes wander to the frescoes along the atrium walls, depicting scenes of myth and legend. They are more than decoration. They set a tone for your day. A young slave passes by, balancing a small tray of bread for delivery to a neighbor in the building next door. You nod approval, noting the efficiency of timing. Every action in the morning is interconnected: breakfast, chores, news, trade, ritual. It's a web, and you are the weaver. A small incident catches your attention. The wax tablet you are working on slips slightly, scratching an unintended mark across the surface. You glance at it and smile. Imperfection is part of life, even in administration. You bend over, lightly smoothing it with the flat edge of your stylus. Sometimes, these tiny blemishes become mnemonic devices. You'll remember that this morning, the edict about olive oil coincided with a smudge on the tablet, and for reasons unknown, it makes the event more memorable. The cat weaves between your legs again, rubbing its head against your shin. You chuckle softly, noting that even in the midst of wax tablets, stylus scratches, and early morning news, life continues with minor diversions. The cat is efficient in its own Waverman control, but also reminds you that not every creature is caught up in the human rituals of governance and responsibility. A knock at the atrium door interrupts your focus. A neighbor, early to rise, peeks in with a question about a grain shipment. You exchange quick pleasantries, settling the matter efficiently with a nod and a note on your tablet. In Rome, social and economic life are inseparable. A single oversight could have consequences cascading through both households. You make a mental note to check the timing of deliveries tomorrow, just in case. You lean back in the quiet atrium, feeling the warmth of the morning sun brushing across your shoulders. The combination of fresh air, tactile work with the wax tablet, and minor social interactions makes the early hours feel almost leisurely, though you know the day ahead will demand far more energy. Historians still argue whether Roman citizens spent mornings primarily in ritual or labor, but your routine is a blend, a carefully balanced mixture of both. A young slave steps forward with a small stack of letters, scrolls, sealed and tied with thin cords. You untie the topmost, scanning the contents. Complaints, requests, confirmations of shipments, and minor business disputes fill the scroll. You make brief notes on a nearby wax tablet, deciding which require personal attention and which can be delegated. It's a rhythm you've mastered. Assess, annotate, assign, and move forward. Quirky fact: some Romans used tiny wax seals, not just for security, but also as a form of personal branding. The shape of the impression could indicate social rank, political allegiance, or even a sense of humor. You run your thumb over the seal on one particularly ornate scroll and imagine the sender smirking at their own clever design. By mid-morning, your tablets are a small archive of the day's administrative concerns. You glance around the atrium again. Sunlight pours through the compluvium, glinting off polished bronze and flickering shadows on the frescoed walls. The staff moves in quiet, purposeful activity, each task calibrated to support the smooth operation of your household. Bread has been distributed, water fetched, animals tended, and messages relayed. The rhythm is hypnotic, comforting, and essential. You scratch a few final notes about debts owed to local merchants, confirming amounts and timing of repayment. These small financial records are vital. Rome's economy is vast and intricate, and even a minor oversight could ripple across days or weeks. You glance at the table, the pile of tablets growing, and feel a quiet satisfaction. This is mundane work, yes, but it anchors you in a world where chaos is always a heartbeat away. The aroma of the kitchen drifts faintly into the atrium. The cook has begun preparing beans for a midday meal, the scent mixing with the lingering aroma of bread and wine. You breathe it in, letting it ground you. The combination of sound, smell, and tactile engagement with your wax tablets creates a sensory tapestry that defines Roman mornings. You pause to rub your eyes, stretching slightly, noticing the faint ache in your back from sitting too long. It's minor, tolerable, and a reminder that even the most controlled morning cannot eliminate every human inconvenience. The city beyond waits, but for now, you are immersed in the satisfaction of having documented, organized, and anticipated. Another servant whispers a minor correction about one of the scrolls. You glance at it, noting the adjustment on your wax tablet. Efficiency, you think, is a skill as necessary as diligence or luck. Rome may be full of noise, bustle, and unpredictability, but your careful record-keeping ensures that at least one corner of the world remains steady and comprehensible. You glance at the cat, who is now sprawled on the floor, unbothered by scrolls, tablets, or morning labor. Humor bubbles again as you imagine it as a minor administrator, attending council meetings and demanding fish-based bribes. You chuckle softly, scratching its head before returning to the work at hand. By the time you step away from the inner hall, your tablets are full, your records in order, and your awareness of the city's pulse heightened. You are prepared to move on to physical exertion, to wake the body that has spent these early hours tending to mind, household, and information. The rhythm of the morning is complete, and now the next chapter awaits. Exercise, stretching, and tending to the temple of your own body. Your feet shuffle across the atrium toward the open courtyard, the warmth of the sun now filtering through the columns and bathing the space in gentle gold. It's time for the body to wake fully, to stretch, move, and remind itself that it is not merely a passive observer of Rome, but an active participant. You begin with a simple routine, lifting arms overhead, twisting at the waist, feeling the fabric of your toga, resist and then give. A gentle tug that reminds you how cumbersome status symbols can be. A joke escapes your lips, muttered softly. Whoever designed this wool deserves a festival of ridicule. The echo of your voice bounces off the walls, mingling with the distant sounds of the city waking. The peristyle is quiet now, save for the rustle of leaves and the soft gurgle of the fountain. Your sandals slap lightly against the paving stones as you walk to the open space. A series of stretches and lunges designed to loosen joints stiff from the night's rest. You notice how the early sun warms your skin, how shadows lengthen and shift across the floor. And you realize there is a strange beauty in the discipline of these motions. They're repetitive, deliberate, and oddly meditative. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that morning exercise improved both longevity and moral character, though historians still argue whether these claims were based on science, superstition, or marketing by gym instructors of the day. You lift one leg, balancing on the other, feeling the strain in your calf, then switch. The cat pads around your feet, weaving through the spaces between your legs, seemingly assessing your form with feline judgment. You laugh softly, bending down to scratch it behind the ears, and it arches its back in contentment. This small companion provides both amusement and practical vermin control, a perfect blend of utility and pleasure. Next, you move to more vigorous exercises. Squats, shoulder rolls, and stretches that force you to bend in ways that remind you just how rarely Romans did this intentionally. Sure, manual labor kept many fit, but these deliberate movements are different. They awaken muscles, sharpen focus, and prepare you for the day's physical demands. You glance at the columns surrounding the courtyard, noting the interplay of light and shadow, imagining yourself a hero from one of the frescoes, though slightly more modestly clad in a toga and sandals. The aroma of the kitchen wafts faintly into the courtyard: bread, beans, and the faint tang of olive oil. It anchors you in the domestic side of your morning, a reminder that Rome is not only empire and politics, but also smell, taste, and touch. You pause mid-stretch, inhaling deeply, letting the sensory blend wash over you. Historians still argue whether morning exercise was primarily for health, aesthetic appeal, or preparation for combat, but for you, feels like a necessary bridge between ritual, information gathering, and the more demanding activities of the day. A servant passes by carrying a small jar of oil. You take it, massaging it into your shoulders and arms. Olive oil isn't just food. It's moisturizer, protector, and ritual substance. The smell is sharp and pleasantly tangy, coating your skin and absorbing slowly. You flex your fingers, testing your grip, then roll your shoulders again, feeling tension melt into warmth. Quirky tidbit: some Romans used oil as a form of mild resistance training, rubbing it into the skin to improve flexibility or as a mark of social status during exercise. The light grows stronger now, filling the courtyard with brilliance. Shadows retract, painted frescoes gleam, and the bronze decorations glint in the sun. You take a moment to admire the effect, appreciating the artistry that surrounds your daily routine. Even in the midst of mundane exercises, the aesthetics of Roman architecture and decoration provide subtle pleasure, a reminder that beauty is woven into life's practical moments. You shift to a set of lunges, stepping forward and bending your knees carefully, feeling the stretch in your thighs. A faint breeze stirs the leaves above, brushing against your face and carrying the mingled scents of earth, cooking, and wax. The sensation grounds you, connecting movement with environment. You pause, eyes closed, listening to distant footsteps in the city beyond. The murmur of voices and the soft rush of the fountain. Rome is alive, a vast organism, and your morning ritual positions you within it as both observer and participant. Next comes balance work. You stand on one leg, arms raised, then switch. The marble cools beneath your feet, the sunlight warms your face, and the cat weaves around you again, brushing lightly against your ankles. Humor surfaces as you imagine it, judging your form like a tiny, furry personal trainer. You chuckle softly, adjusting your posture, noting the subtle improvement with each repetition. Discipline is not cruelty, it's preparation. After a few more stretches, you move to what might be considered light combat training. A wooden staff, roughly carved but smooth from repeated use, rests nearby. You swing it slowly, practicing movements that simulate real defensive positions, imagining a hypothetical intruder or rival citizen crossing the atrium threshold. You are not training for war, yet muscle memory, focus, and coordination sharpen with every repetition. Quirky tidbit: Romans sometimes practiced staff or spear drills in domestic courtyards. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic, practical, or a little of both. Sweat begins to form on your brow, glinting in the morning sun. Your tunic clings slightly, the folds of the toga resisting some motions, but you persist. These movements aren't just physical, they're mental, bridging the gap between ritual, household management, and the demands of the day ahead. You lean forward, stretching your hamstrings, feeling the satisfying pull of muscle waking fully. A servant approaches with a small basin of water, allowing you to splash your face, rinse sweat, and refresh your hands. The cold hits sharply, a reminder that the day is progressing, that stillness cannot last indefinitely. You blink rapidly, enjoying the shock and the clarity it brings. Small tasks like this washing, stretching, touching, moving anchor you in the present and prepare you for the whirlwind beyond your walls. You finish with a series of slow breaths, arms raised, torso twisting gently. The courtyard feels alive with light, sound, and scent. Frescoes, bronze fittings, and plants shimmer under the sun's gaze. You feel grounded, awake, and alert, your body and mind synchronized after the morning ritual of movement. You glance down at the cat, now stretched comfortably in a patch of sunlight, and laugh softly. It seems content to watch you finish, unimpressed and serene. By now, the atrium and courtyard have transformed fully with the sunrise. Light spills into corners, the shadows retreat, and the house hums softly with the quiet satisfaction of tasks well begun. Your muscles are warm, your mind alert, and the household ready to shift into the next stage, attending to social, civic, and commercial duties that await the citizen once the sun commands the city fully awake. You leave the courtyard with a quiet sense of accomplishment, the warmth from morning exercise still coursing through your muscles. The atrium now glows in the high sun, and the household hums with subdued energy, each servant and family member moving in familiar patterns, their actions almost choreographed after countless mornings of repetition. Today, however, your attention turns outward the civic commercial and social responsibilities that define you as a Roman citizen. The city beyond the walls is awake now, alive with commerce, debate, and endless possibility. You step carefully, adjusting your toga, knowing that in Rome, appearances matter almost as much as action. First, the forum beckons. The streets are bustling, yet you navigate them with practiced ease, noting merchants setting up stalls, wagons laden with grain and wine, and the occasional beggar hoping for charity. You inhale deeply, the mixed smells of roasting bread, hay, and damp stone filling your lungs. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that the scent of the morning city could influence fortune, mood, and even political favor, though historians still argue whether such beliefs were widespread or merely anecdotal. Your footsteps click against the paving stones, a rhythm familiar and reassuring, echoing against the walls of nearby shops and tabernae. At the forum, traders shout prices, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. You pause at one stall to inspect fresh olives and figs, using a practiced eye to gauge quality. The merchant bows respectfully, expecting the customary negotiation. You offer a price slightly below his asking point, smiling as he accepts, perhaps amused, perhaps embarrassed. These small exchanges are more than commerce, they are ritual, reinforcing social hierarchies, respect, and subtle dominance. Moving through the crowded piazza, you notice the subtle signs of political life. A senator striding past, attendants trailing with notes, a minor magistrate shouting updates, a philosopher gesturing grandly to a small circle of listeners. Historians still argue whether these moments were performative, truly informative, or a combination, but for you, they are a reminder of the layered, performative complexity of Roman life. You absorb snippets of conversation, noting alliances, disputes, and potential opportunities. A street performer catches your eye, an acrobat flipping with astonishing grace. You grin, admiring skill even in the smallest of spectacles. Quirky tidbit. Some citizens believed that watching early morning performances could bring luck, though you suspect it's mostly for entertainment. You toss a small coin into his outstretched hand, earning a nod and a flourish. The little exchange reminds you that Rome is not merely political and commercial, it is also a city of culture, of humor, and small fleeting moments of delight. You move toward the basilica, where legal matters await. Lawyers and clients are assembling, voices rising in argument, then dropping into whispered consultation. You find a quiet corner to observe, noting disputes over contracts, property, and minor grievances. A scribe approaches, ready to record statements on wax tablets. You watch the process closely, both as a citizen and as a connoisseur of information flow. Each argument, each written note, each gesture communicates layers of meaning beyond words. A minor dispute catches your attention, a disagreement over wine delivery. The client insists he received less than promised. The merchant claims the quantity is correct. You suppress a smile, aware that such quarrels are eternal, as predictable as the sunrise. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans would settle disputes by consulting augurs or performing small rituals of luck, even for mundane matters. Historians still argue whether these superstitions materially influenced outcomes or served as social theater. You jot mental notes on the case, amused by the persistence of ritual in daily life. Nearby, a street poet recites a verse about a gladiator, lost in battle yet victorious in spirit. The crowd reacts with laughter, groans, and applause. You linger briefly, letting the rhythm of words, the cadence of performance, and the communal response wash over you. This interlude is brief but grounding. A reminder that even amidst bureaucracy and commerce, the human desire for story, humor, and spectacle persists. Afterwards, you visit a few merchants to confirm deliveries and accounts. Olive oil, wine, and grain must be balanced against anticipated expenditures. You inspect amphorae for signs of leakage, jars for spoilage, and scrolls for correct notation. Efficiency is paramount. One clerk fumbles, nervously adjusting a wax seal. You raise an eyebrow, not unkindly, and he corrects it. Small moments like this illustrate the delicate balance of trust, authority, and human fallibility that sustains Roman life. Returning toward the residential district, you pause to greet neighbors. Social cohesion is critical. These interactions reinforce alliances, ensure awareness of local happenings, and maintain a network of mutual obligation. You exchange news about market trends, gossip about forum debates, and reminders of upcoming religious observances. Humor surfaces occasionally, a whispered joke about last night's gladiator mishap or the neighbor's unruly child. These light moments are vital, softening the weight of civic responsibility. Back at your house, the morning's exertions and errands converge. You cross the threshold, greeted by the familiar smells of your domestic domain bread, oil, and the faint lingering scent of incense. The household staff moves efficiently, now aware that your attention has returned indoors. You exchange brief greetings, noting the completion of tasks and small corrections needed. Historians still argue whether Roman mornings were rigidly structured or more fluid, but your experience is a blend. Disciplined, yet adaptable. Ritualistic, yet responsive to external events. You pause briefly in the atrium, sunlight streaming through the compluvium, catching on bronze decorations and frescoes. The light seems to animate the space, making even minor imperfections glow with life. A servant brings a small basin of water, allowing you to refresh again after the exertions and walks. You splash your face, the cold water sharpening your senses. A subtle shock that signals readiness for the next phase. Midday meals, business correspondence, and attending to social obligations within your own household. In these moments, you reflect on the orchestration required to move seamlessly from domestic ritual to civic engagement. Each morning is a delicate balancing act, a blend of preparation, observation, exercise, and minor negotiation. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that failing to perform even one element of the morning routine could result in minor misfortunes for the rest of the day. You smile, thinking of the tiny absurdities that persist across centuries. By the time the sun reaches a clear height, your morning errands are complete. The city continues its rhythmic pulse outside, yet within your walls, the household is orderly, staff attentive, and rituals respected. You pause for a final moment, inhaling deeply, aware that you have navigated the complexity of Rome before the day has truly begun. There is satisfaction in this mastery, a quiet pride that you have successfully balanced the demands of body, mind, household, and civic life. The house hums quietly now, sunlight fully illuminating the atrium, casting gentle shadows across the frescoed walls. You move deliberately through the familiar spaces, sandals clicking softly against the stone. The morning chores, ritual, exercise, and civic engagements have been executed with precision, yet there is always more to do. Your attention shifts to the final phase of pre-noon activities, overseeing the finer details of the household, confirming arrangements, and savoring a few moments of calm before the bustle of midday truly takes hold. First, you check the storerooms again. Jars of olive oil, amphorae of wine, sacks of grain, and containers of dried legumes are all arranged carefully. You run your hand over the cool clay surfaces, noting small cracks, checking lids, and ensuring quantities are correct. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that whispering to stored goods could preserve their freshness, though historians still argue whether such rituals had any practical effect or were purely superstitious. You whisper softly anyway, amused, because ritual even minor or symbolic anchors your day. Next, the kitchen calls for attention. The cook has begun preparations for the midday meal, chopping vegetables, tending sauces, and heating water. You inhale the mingling aromas: beans, bread, herbs, and note the subtle differences from yesterday. A small slip in temperature or timing could alter flavors. So you move closer, watching intently, offering soft corrections here and there. You notice a young assistant frowning at a pot, unsure whether the contents are thick enough. You smile gently and tap the rim with your fingers. Consistency, my friend. Like the law, not like gossip. Laughter bubbles quietly, easing tension in the room. The household staff is now fully synchronized, moving with almost silent efficiency. You pass through the inner hall, observing small details. The laundry has been folded neatly, the well is full, the courtyard swept. Every minor act contributes to the smooth functioning of your domestic empire. Historians still argue whether Roman households relied more on slaves or family labor, but you appreciate the interdependence that creates harmony in the morning. A sudden clatter from the kitchen interrupts your thoughts. You glance over to see a pot has tipped slightly, spilling some beans onto the floor. You suppress a sigh, more amused than annoyed, and bend to help a servant gather the contents. Small mistakes happen everywhere, even in well-ordered households. Quirky tidbit. Roman cooks sometimes considered minor spills a good omen, though you suspect this is a way to avoid scolding. You chuckle, thinking perhaps you need more omens in your life. After ensuring the kitchen is back on track, you move to the garden. Plants, herbs, and small decorative shrubs require attention. They are part of the household's beauty and utility. You inspect basil, oregano, and rue, noting which require watering and which need trimming. A gentle breeze carries the scent of soil and greenery, blending with the lingering aromas of cooking and incense. You crouch to pull a few weeds, feeling the damp earth in your hands. Ritual, work, and care intermingle seamlessly here. Rome, after all, is a city of details, both grand and minute. Next, you attend to personal grooming. Water from the cistern flows into a basin, cool and refreshing. You dip a cloth and wash your face, shoulders, and forearms, feeling the chill awaken every nerve ending. A comb smooths your hair into place, and you inspect your reflection briefly. The toga sits properly, sandals adjusted, hair tamed. Appearance is a form of respect, not vanity, and in Rome, it signals discipline, authority, and readiness. Quirky tidbit. Some citizens used scented oils to mask the odors of early morning labor, though historians still argue whether such practices were universally adopted or confined to the elite. You dab a small amount onto your arms, appreciating the subtle fragrance. Returning to the atrium, you gather messages delivered while you were in the garden. Scrolls sealed in wax, notes from merchants, and a few personal letters await. You scan quickly, prioritizing correspondence that requires immediate attention. A neighbor writes to confirm arrangements for a shared market stall. A merchant requests clarification on an olive oil order, and a distant friend reports on festival plans. You make mental notes, delegating tasks to appropriate household members. Efficiency, again, is key. The cat curls into a sunny spot nearby, watching you with lazy curiosity. You smile, thinking how little it cares for commerce, politics, or ritual. It is content simply to observe. Humor bubbles up as you imagine explaining to a fellow citizen the cat's role in the household. Guardian of vases, distributor of minor entertainment, vermin controller. It purrs softly, indifferent to the imagined civic accolades. You pause by the lararium one final time, noting that the incense has burned low. The offerings remain undisturbed, and the tiny figurines seem bathed in morning light. A soft prayer escapes your lips, a private acknowledgement of continuity, protection, and gratitude. The Larrys and Peanades have observed, in their quiet way, the unfolding of another morning. You smile, reassured, and step back into the bustling rhythm of the house. A final inspection of the courtyard and stables follows. The horses fed, the stable cleaned, and water for the animals is fresh. Each small task contributes to the larger harmony of the household and, indirectly, to your city life. Even minor mismanagement here could ripple outward, disrupting commerce, work, or domestic peace. You take a deep breath, savoring the calm satisfaction of tasks completed efficiently. By now, the morning is fully established. The sun climbs higher, bathing every corner of your home in light. The household is orderly, the staff attentive, the animals cared for, and the city beyond awaits your engagement. You pause briefly, savoring the stillness. The sense of accomplishment and the subtle joy that comes from mastering the delicate choreography of morning life. Small humor and reflection continue to mingle in your mind. You recall the gladiator who lost his sandals, the spilled beans, the whispered rumors, and the cat's indifferent gaze. Each moment, no matter how minor, contributes to the intricate tapestry of life before sunrise. Rome is a city of details, patterns, and routines, and by observing, participating, and guiding them, you assert control over your own small empire within the greater chaos. Now, the household is prepared for the day. The city beyond is alive with sound, smell, and movement. You stand in the atrium, taking a final, slow breath, and feel the satisfaction of mastery, ritual, and humor all woven seamlessly into the early hours. Today is underway, and you, the citizen, are ready for whatever it may bring. The morning has stretched its arms fully now, and the bustle beyond your walls feels slightly distant, softened by the calm that resides within. You pause in the atrium, letting your gaze drift over familiar sights, the tiny Larrys and Peanades standing watch. The cat curled in a sunbeam, the polished bronze reflecting golden light like tiny suns. Each element seems to hum quietly, as if aware that the day is only just beginning. And yet here, in this suspended bubble of light and warmth, time slows. You take a deep breath, feeling the cool marble beneath your feet and the gentle breeze brushing your face, and allow your senses to settle into the rhythm of domestic serenity. Your mind wanders over the morning's events, tracing the flow from the first flicker of dawn through prayer, exercise, administration, and civic engagement. Each moment carries its own texture, the whisper of incense, the scratch of stylus against wax, the soft thud of sandals on stone, the aroma of bread and roasted beans. You notice the subtle layering, the tactile memory of wax impressions, the scent of herbs, the warmth of sunlight on your shoulders. These details, once small and nearly invisible, now gather into a tapestry of quiet accomplishment. Historians still argue whether Roman citizens genuinely appreciated these domestic rituals, or if they were strictly obligatory. But for you, the pleasure is unmistakable. The cat stretches, yawns, and flicks its tail with absolute indifference to empire or civic duty. You smile, a soft chuckle escaping, thinking that perhaps this small creature embodies a wisdom lost to humans obsessed with control. Humor threads through your reflection, quiet but persistent, reminding you that life is lived not only in duties performed perfectly, but also in small, unplanned delights of fallen olive, a smudge on a wax tablet, the unexpected performance of a street poet, or a young slave's earnest smile at successfully completing a minor task. Your eyes move across the courtyard garden. Herbs glimmer in the sun, leaves tipped with droplets of dew that survived the morning chill. You reach down to touch basil, feeling the tiny serrated leaves between your fingers, inhaling their sharp green fragrance. You let your hands brush the soil, grounding yourself in the tactile reality of your surroundings. Quirky tidbit: some Romans believed that morning contact with plants improved mental clarity, though historians still debate whether this was symbolic advice or a genuine practice. You decide it works, nonetheless, and allow a sense of calm to deepen within. The kitchen smells of lingering bread, roasted beans, and a hint of olive oil. You imagine the meals that will be served later, appreciating the quiet choreography required to maintain sustenance in both quantity and quality. Each small task, chopping, stirring, washing, checking temperatures, is part of the greater rhythm. And recognizing this pattern gives your mind a comforting sense of continuity. You notice the servants moving in harmony, silent yet deliberate, and the efficiency feels almost musical. From the inner hall, a breeze stirs, carrying the faint murmur of the city outside, carts rolling, voices echoing from nearby streets, the occasional bray of a mule or bark of a dog. The sounds are distant now, softened by walls and practice, more like a gentle score than chaos. You close your eyes, letting your other senses take precedence. The smooth weight of the wax tablet, the warmth of sun on skin, the faint clatter of utensils in the kitchen. Your body, having moved and stretched, feels full of potential energy yet relaxed in the quiet aftermath of exertion. You move slowly to the lararium, kneeling once more in a gesture of gratitude. The incense has burned low, leaving a delicate curl of smoke rising lazily from its burner. You whisper a soft acknowledgement to the household gods, thanking them for protection, routine, and small successes. You pause, eyes closed, listening to the faint sounds of the house and the city beyond. Even the smallest gestures, a bow, a whispered word, a measured breath, are part of the vast mosaic of human experience. The cat rises lazily and wanders into a sunbeam that is shifted with the movement of the day, settling comfortably. Its presence, quiet and serene, reminds you that life contains pauses, moments of stillness that are just as valuable as action. You inhale again, imagining the sunlight warming every surface, the air carrying scents of earth, oil, bread, and herbs. Humor and wonder mingle, softening the edges of duty and expectation. Your thoughts drift gently to the day ahead, but without urgency. There is satisfaction in preparation, in rituals performed with care, in knowledge gathered and small tasks completed. Rome's pulse continues outside your walls, yet within, a slower rhythm persists, one defined by reflection, awareness, and presence. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed that a well-ordered morning would bring about mental clarity and even luck, though historians still debate whether this was superstition or practical advice. Regardless, the alignment of mind, body, and environment feels undeniably real. You settle onto a low bench in the courtyard, letting your back press against the cool stone. The sunlight continues to pour down, gentle and golden, while shadows shrink into the corners. You notice the faint rustle of leaves, the glint of polished bronze, the soft hum of activity just beginning elsewhere. There is comfort in routine, in knowing that each small element, ritual, administration, exercise, civic participation, fits together in a deliberate, living mosaic. A final glance at the wax tablets and scrolls reminds you that the morning's duties are concluded. The city waits, with its noise, chaos, and demands. But you are ready. Each note, each mark, each interaction has prepared you, and now there is space to breathe, to observe, to move forward with confidence and calm. You smile quietly, recognizing the pleasure in mastering small routines, the joy of minor victories, and the humor inherent in human endeavor. The cat stretches once more, tail curling, eyes half closed in languid contentment. You mirror that relaxation in your own body, letting the shoulders fall, the muscles loosen, the mind wander with gentle curiosity. The house remains ordered, the staff attentive, and the city beyond unfolds predictably yet ever surprisingly. Your morning has been successful, deliberate, and imbued with subtle humor, sensory richness, and thoughtful ritual. Finally, you take a slow, deliberate breath, exhaling the last traces of tension. The day is ready to be met, the city alive and waiting, But in this moment, there is only the gentle interplay of sunlight, scent, movement, and quiet reflection. You feel anchored, prepared, and subtly amused by the tiny absurdities and delights that have colored your morning. Rome continues, vast and intricate, yet you have claimed your small piece of order within it.